Yeah, come on up here. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who I've not met, I'm Kevin Lund. I'm a district court judge here in Rochester, and this is my hometown. I grew up here, came back, raised a family, and have enjoyed being back here for over 30-some years. This is my dear friend John Kriesel, and I also have to point out my friend Mike Pruitt, who's documenting this event for this sole reason. It was listed as a walking tour that I was in charge of. It's only a matter of moments before John hijacks the walking tour. So you just need to understand that this is kind of a loosely organized walking tour, and try to keep up the best you can. We are going to make our way down First Avenue toward the Chateau, and then down East Center Street to the amphitheater, where there is a calliope, and there's cookies and there's lemonade. So we're hoping everyone can make it throughout the course of the walking tour. The organization that's behind this is a loosely knit organization called the Rochester Conservancy. And if you're interested in joining up, we're collecting names and emails and addresses, and you may get some information from us if you'd like to join our efforts relative to heritage preservation, education, and growth. And there's a little mission statement there. I don't like the term mission statement, but that's what it is. And then also something that expresses the Conservancy. Yes, John?
Why don't we introduce the Conservancy members here?
Oh,
Jane and...
Okay, John wants me to introduce the Conservancy members. There's Jane and Steve, who are here. Is Bunny here? Where's Bunny? Well, Bunny's here. John and I, my wife Diane. Who else are Conservancy members that... Oh, and Nancy Slocum, who's waving her cane over there.
Let's all of us raise our hands. We have membership in the Conservancy.
There you go.
The newbies here.
Everybody who wants to be a member. Well, we'll take a vote at the end.
Well,
they need to be persuaded.
Be careful.
They need to be persuaded. I'd initially like to thank the Downs family, who's been so gracious in supplying the coffee and the other goodies. And they are Cafe Steam, and they are the driving force behind the restoration of the historic Conley Moss McAndrew building that is right here. So if Tracy, Hunter, and Aiden, if you guys want to come on up and just let everyone know who you are. And the community deeply appreciates what you're doing with this building. It's going to be marvelous. Yeah. A great example of adaptive reuse and heritage preservation.
Should we start with that?
Did you want to say something?
About the building?
Yeah, I can.
Sure.
Yeah, Tracy's going to tell you a little bit about the building, and then Randy, you're up next.
I get the stairs up.
We do.
All right. Oh, hello. Well, thank you for starting this wonderful walking tour. Can you hear me? Not on? There.
There you go.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for coming out on that beautiful Saturday to start this wonderful walking tour at this building. We have been really excited for the last year and a half. Hunter and I have been part of a large community of people who've been incredibly supportive to take and turn this into a building that was slated to be torn down to a building that's going to be a thriving part of this community if all goes as planned. Just to give you a sense of what's going to be coming here, there's going to be a restaurant called Blue Duck Kitchen that's going to be in the front. It's going to be opening in August. It's going to be it's run by the soon-to-be former executive chefs of the Four Daughters Winery, and they are coming out to start their own restaurant. There'll be an event center in the back, so we'll all be able to have a lot of community events and community congregation things that will be happening in the back. And then there's going to be a technology working space, co-working space called Collider up in the top with both Hunter and I's technology company and Brand Hoot in the front. So there's going to be a lot of life that's going to be coming to this corner because of all the work of some amazing people that have brought this to existence. For those of you, Jane, maybe we can talk about the history of this building, but I will leave that to Jane or to John, who also have long histories in helping and restoring this building. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
I'll reiterate what Tracy has said. Thank you so much for coming. It's nice to see a lot of new faces in the crowd. And we're just thrilled to be here at the former Moss and McAndrew, historic Moss and McAndrew building. This building was built in 1900 to be no, I'm just trying to get on the microphone. I'm not sure I'm coming through. To be garment manufacturing company, and it functioned in that capacity for about 3 years, and then soon became the factory for the Conley Camera Company, which supplied all the cameras for the emerging Sears and Roebuck Company, which is very exciting. It was a major employer here in Rochester at that time, and grew so fast that they needed another much larger facility about 9 blocks north, which is no longer extant. Then the Moss and McAndrew Company, which was a plumbing and heating and mechanical contracting company, in the era when we didn't have even much of a water supply here in Rochester. They were just on the forefront of an emerging industry. They worked very closely with Mayo Clinic on all the Mayo Clinic facilities and St. Mary's Hospital that were being built in the early part of the 20th century. Also collaborated with Dr. Plummer and clinic staff on innovative medical technologies and heating systems, different kinds of systems actually, for the clinic buildings, which is something that the National Park Service has been very attentive to. And this building is currently in the process of being reviewed for the National Register of Historic Places. Has crossed a number of important milestones, and we're hoping for an announcement very soon as to potential listing. So that's where we are.
All right, great. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. I'm being prompted to say that the outcome of all the innovation and collaboration with Mayo Clinic was that the company vice president of the Moss and McAndrew Company went on to become the first engineer at Mayo Clinic, and really was the germ of what is now the facilities department at Mayo Clinic. And as it happens, John Kriesel is related to the family that the Moss family of Moss and McAndrew, which eventually bought out Mr. McAndrew, and it became in the 50s, I believe, Moss Plumbing and Heating, which was a leading plumbing and heating company here in Rochester for many, many years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. John, did you want to say anything about the Moss McAndrew building?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. John's going to get his shot here later on. So I'd like to introduce our Rochester City Council President, Randy Staver. He has a proclamation he would like to read relative to Preservation Month. President Staver?
All right. Thank you. It's great to be here on a beautiful day. Like Kevin, I'm a native of Rochester, Minnesota, and it's just a great town, and we're looking for a lot of wonderful things in the future. I'm here representing Ardell Brady, our mayor, and the Rochester City Council. I'd also like to acknowledge Councilmember Michael Wojcik is here as well, so thank you for attending. With that in mind, I've got a short proclamation that I'll read that comes from the mayor. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas historic preservation has a significant role to play in fostering development that is more environmentally and economically sustainable. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas This Place Matters is the theme of National Preservation Month 2016 and is co-sponsored by the City of Rochester and Rochester Conservancy, the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Ardell Brady, Mayor of Rochester, and the City of Rochester, do proclaim May 2016 as National Preservation Month and call upon the people of Rochester, Minnesota to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance dated this date, May 21st, 2016. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Randy.
Very briefly, I'd just like to have a moment of silence as it relates to Alan Cavagnano, who has played a role in walking tours, has certainly interacted with Kevin Lund, the History Center, has made a big contribution to this community. He just passed some time ago. And also, on the behalf of the mayor, he said it was all right to say if you want to have your thoughts and prayers for his wife, Judy, please do so, because prayers and numbers of people to encourage others does make a difference. So with that, if we'll just have a moment of silence and take your thoughts and your prayers anywhere that you would like to take them.
Right.
Thank you.
All
Kevin?
right. Nope. Okay. Bunny, do you have those books? I'm going to turn this off.
Do we not use it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll
This is
put it
too
away.
distracting. Just come on in here a little tighter, because we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. Those of you who are new to town, maybe those of you who are not so new to town, I would recommend a number of books for you. The first is The Doctor's Mail by Helen Clapsaddle. Helen Clapsaddle, if you live here and you haven't read this book, shame on you. Yes, thank you. The other is Images of Rochester, Minnesota. This is a book that was written and put together by a gentleman named Ted St. Main, who works with Mike. It's just a marvelous compendium of postcards and photographs and little vignettes of our history. It's a marvelous book. And then, again, to honor Alan, it's called the Postcard History Series. It's of Rochester. This is just a remarkable, remarkable book. Alan spent years culling through all kinds of rich collections of postcards that people had in the community, and I think many of us should endeavor to have a volume 2 of this, because some of us have come into possession of an enormous collection of postcards that sheds light on even more aspects of the community that many of us are unfamiliar with and uneducated about. So that's my pitch relative to these books. I get no fee for pitching those, so it's totally selfless, all right? We're going to start this tour, and you learned a little bit about, come on in, you learned a little bit about Moss McAndrew. Those of you near Mr. Allman, Jeff, when you look down Broadway, good morning, Jeff. When you look down Broadway, we're not going to walk down that way, but that is the original commercial district. That building that's on the corner, the Patterson-Dahlberg building, was the first brick building ever constructed in this community. And it was built in 1858. It was the same year that Minnesota became a state. So that was it. That was the end of town. That's where town began. And the gentleman who built that building, Dr. Lewis Kelly, I think you could arguably state that he was the first physician in the city of Rochester. He also brought the first piano to this community, and legend has it that his wife would play the piano and Indians would come and sit on the banks of the Zumbro to listen to the music that was coming out of the second floor. So that's the history there. That building, the bricks that the building was constructed by were fired in a place called Whitcomb's Kiln. And so those are bricks that were actually fired in Rochester and were part of that building. It's a remarkable building. The rest of Broadway, again, is the early commercial district. It has a rich history all in and of itself. And it's our hope that the restoration that have been there, I see Michael and Gillian, who've done a remarkable job with the building just north of the Dahlberg building, Patterson-Dahlberg. They were really the first people that started the revitalization of that block. And it's taken off, and it's just marvelous. So we're hoping that those pockets of the community are protected. I am going to make a pitch for this. Next, in the alley behind, you can't hear? Nobody can hear?
No, there's too much traffic.
Oh.
Get a little bit further away from you.
Okay, can you hear if I stand in here? Okay. All right. I'm sorry. We expected 10 people to show up. Yeah. We didn't think there'd be this many. Yeah. One of the things you need to know, does anyone know where the Time Theater used to be? Okay, gold bond green stamps, right? Okay. Many of us in the community believes that those are still solid buildings that can be used in the community, and what a wonderful place for artists, bookstores, everything else to go on in the community. Many of us envision that this area in here, with the revitalization of this building, the revitalization that's taken place on Broadway, would become, in essence, our Dinkytown, with UMR, Soldiers Field, which is a historic site behind us, other things like that. So we're hoping that people in positions of power would think very carefully before giving up that valuable river space to some massive project, and instead make it the walkable scale that is part of the fabric of this neighborhood, and turn it back to the community to use. So that's one of the things that one should ponder, I believe.
Mention the Dubuque Trail.
Oh yeah, the Dubuque Trail. Yeah, I mean, this Broadway, this was created by ox, dragging logs down Broadway?
Yes, by Head, George Head.
By George Head. That's how the street was created. That's how Broadway was created. This was just a thicket. There was nothing here. It's hard to even get your head around that with all the majesty that surrounds us now. This building, we're going to make our way down first, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out what's called the Hotel Francis. It's still one of the oldest remaining hotels in town, next to the old Carlton, which we'll talk about. And it was built in 1918, and this is a classic example of adaptive reuse. This serves as a wonderful refuge for many homeless people in our community. And I think we should endeavor to keep places like this alive, so that they are places of refuge in the heart of our city for people that need help. So, but that's a wonderful building that was done with a variety of different groups in town, some of whom didn't always get along, but they came together for the purposes of making that something that I think is really important in our community and something that we should be proud of. All right?
Lee
So,
needs to speak next.
who does? Lee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lee's going to tell you a little bit about the building, right? You're going to tell us about the Humpmobile store?
Upmobile
I'm
and
going to turn this for him.
He's going to tell you about the
transportation in town.
the building right next door to it, which has looks like it's fallen in, right? Next to this house? Well, wait till you hear about what that was. All right. So,
This way. Okay, there you go.
now watch out.
When I ran into John the other night out at the History Center, and he kind of roped me into this. He says, I get 2 minutes, I may go a little long.
Wait, John gave somebody a time limit?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Lee Hilgendorf, and if you read the paper, Lens on History, I was left Lens on History. I got an email from Alan Calavano, which was like the voice of God, said, you will take over Lens of History. I said, yes, sir, I will. So it'll be just about a year that I've been doing that. I've done a lot of research on the transportation end of Rochester, the streets, the roads, the car dealers, gas stations and things like that. I've got lists and pictures that are just nuts. 3 buildings here. If you look at the 3 buildings, you see there's 3 different styles of architecture. The one in the middle was the last one built. It was built by a man named Thomas Barber. He was a sign painter. He was a carriage painter, and he got caught in a fire and lost his shop. He came over here and he built this building. And in 1914, the building went up. In 1915, there's a photograph that's been published several times. It's the home of the Humpmobile. It was a car dealership. If you can imagine, there was a door in the center of the building where you drove in and out. He sold King automobiles, Briscoe automobiles, and he was there from about 15 till about 20 when he sold out to one of his salesmen, who was A.J. Osmond. And if you're familiar with the old Mustangs hockey team, Osmond was the guy who brought the team in here. He ended up owning O&O Sporting Goods. It's over on what's now the Peace Plaza. And he was instrumental in bringing a lot of sports teams to town. But when he came to town, he was a car salesman. And he bought this, and it was a service motor company for many years. It was a car dealership until the mid-50s. They sold Oldsmobiles there. And it was also a gas station. If you can imagine, the gas pump was on the sidewalk. Not uncommon, but it was when I found that information out, I wondered, why would you put a gas pump here? And you start to look, and where New Ridge Apartments was a gas station. And obviously over here was a gas station. Okay, I'll get to that. We gotta go around the corner. I've got a car dealership story for you. But this was a gas station. Why would they have all of these gas stations in the middle of Rochester? Well, I found out that this block right here between Broadway and First, which used to be between Broadway and Main Street, was the crossroads of Rochester. All three major byways that came through town went on this one block area. You mentioned the Dubuque Trail. That came up what's now 3rd Avenue. It turned and came here because the bridge over here was the first bridge, permanent bridge, that was across the Zumbro River. So this is where the stagecoaches came in. They came across that bridge. The Dubuque Trail came over to Main Street, went 2 blocks to the north, and then went west of town. And eventually turned a little to the northwest and went on to St. Paul. The Dubuque Trail was actually the first highway in Rochester, in Minnesota. It was a military supply trail from the Port of Dubuque to Fort Snelling, and it came through Rochester. The other one was, if you can imagine, 1916, 100 years ago today, if you were standing here, you were on the Black and Yellow Trail. Black and Yellow Trail was an automobile trail that ran from Chicago to Yellowstone National Park. And when it came through town, it came in past the medical facility out here, down 4th Street, came to this same corner, went 2 blocks to the north to Zumbro Street, and then turned and went west. And as the Chamber of Commerce liked to say, it went on to Yellowstone National Park. And once you made that left turn, it was straight to Yellowstone. The third highway came from, it was called the Stewartville to Lake City Road, so we're really intent with the names on these. And it actually came down what is County 8, west of the airport, down through Bamber Valley School, across where Apache Mall is at, to 11th Street. And it snaked through town, and it came up to this corner, it turned here, and it went north up Broadway out of town. So all 3 major roads came across this street. This was the crossroads, this was the center of traffic in Rochester.
Mentioned up until recently there was a wagon stop right next to the old Bamber Valley School. Remember, on the side of the hill?
There was. There was a stagecoach stop out by Bamber Valley School. I think it's gone now. But it's one of the casualties of modern society. But the Hotmobile dealer down here, it became the printing shop. But like I said, the piece I found interesting was the gas pumps in the middle of the street. Yeah, John, I'm okay. So when we get around the corner, I'm going to hijack the tour in front of Creative Salon. I'm going to tell you another story, but don't tell John.
Well, we had other dealerships around here, the Ford Garage, Nash, Buick. Everybody was down in this area, and my gosh, Lee, that information as to why they put gasoline pumps here probably had to do with the car dealerships.
Yep.
That was just fascinating.
One more
on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Yeah.
Because that was the only place he had to put a pump.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's several pictures of different pumps where they were on the sidewalk in town. It's really strange.
And prior to that, when you go back to, let's say, 1858, get your head around that all of this was mud. We had wooden boardwalks. Men walked on the outside of the wooden boardwalk to keep the filth from the animals or the mud splashing on the ladies, okay? So that's just a mere 1858, a little over 100 years ago. This was that corridor.
Yeah. Well, this is perfect. You've led me into this. We came across this interesting story that happened right here on the corner of 4th Street, what used to be College Street, and Broadway. And I'm just going to read this to you. It's real quick, and then we're going to move. On a wintry Saturday in Rochester, Minnesota, Dr. William Worrell Mayo was hurrying to reach a patient in the country. As he peered through bundled layers of warm clothes, seated in his light open sleigh, he urged its spirited horses too fast around the corner of 4th Street and Broadway. Suddenly, the sleigh skidded across the icy street, struck the sidewalk, and tipped over, dumping the short, slim doctor onto the ice. Unfazed, Mayo jumped to his feet, chased his horses a block down Broadway. With the help of some neighbors, he brought them under control. It was an only inconvenient interruption in the 53-year-old doctor's day. He led the runaway horses back to his barn, harnessed his other 2 horses, which, like the runaways, were selected for speed. Then he continued on his way, making his country calls. That would have been in about 1873. So every time you come by that corner, think of Dr. Mayo sliding on the ice, okay? All right, so we're going to make our way down 1st Avenue here. Here we go.
I had you stop here because this is the oldest building on Main Street. Soon to be demolished, of course. But this was the second automobile dealership in Rochester. In 1908, 2 guys, Witherstein and Gilbert, took on the Ford agency. And they opened the second dealership in town. And it was also the first agency on what would 3 years later become known as Automobile Row. This was Main Street back in prior to 1918, if anybody knows the history on that, when they changed the streets. And at one time in the 300 block, you had a gas station and another gas station. You had 4 automobile dealerships, 1 parts store, and 2 repair shops, all in the 300 block of Main Street. 1921, they ran out of room. So they went across the street where US Bank is located, and the Ford dealership moved down there. And from that point, there were 7 more dealerships that were built by the time Main Street, or 1st Avenue at that time, got extended past 6th Street down here. That was 6th Street was the end, basically the end of the street down there. But this was 1911, this was celebrated as Automobile Row. If you wanted to buy a car from 1908 to 1978, 70-year period, this is where you wanted to come to do it. This was the center of commerce when it came to the automobile. So, but this was the first dealership on the building, or on the street, and it's the oldest living building on Main Street in Rochester, and it's soon to be gone.
There you go. All right, thank you. All right, we're gonna head down to 3rd, okay?
One more time. Yeah, see, Kevin was afraid that John was going to hijack the tour.
Speak up.
Speak up. This, again, this was Main Street, and this was 3rd Street. This has always been 3rd Street. And when they changed the names of the streets in Rochester in 1918, 2 street names didn't change. That's Broadway and 3rd. And if you ever want to see a crazy mess, look at the map of Rochester and the numbering system they used to use when they put this town together. It was nuts. That's why they had to change it. Another automobile story. On this corner, This is where the Brown Hotel stood. Next to the Brown Hotel was a livery stable. Charles Brown and his partner, Mr. Hazley, ran a hack service. Hack service, dray service. In those days, they had horse-drawn wagons, and they would go to the railroad depot and bring people down to the hotel. It's taxi service nowadays, but back those days, you were a hack man. They had a stable next to the family hotel over here. Mr. Brown wanted to look at the new cars, and he thought this is 1911, and he's thinking that this is the wave of the future, the horses, who needs them. Everything is going to be in the automobile business. He decided he was going to sell automobiles, so he opened an agency. He remodeled the front of the building. He had 6 cars. In the back, he had 24 horses. He had 12 wagons and carriages for his hack business. Upstairs, he kept the food and the bedding for the horses. Also upstairs in the back of the building was a guy named Thomas Barber. I mentioned his name earlier. He had a sign painting business on the 2nd floor in the back. In 1911, of course, there was no latex paint. It was all linseed oil, highly flammable stuff. And just for fun, there was a blacksmith on the ground floor in the alley in the back. Somewhere there's a code violation here. I haven't seen it yet. One night, see if this isn't convenient. One night, 2 weeks after Rochester got his first motorized pumper truck that was kept in the fire station at the south end of Broadway, a young child, the newspaper story tells, a young child was walking down the alley in the middle of the night and saw smoke coming from the back of the livery stable. And the ensuing firefight was quite spectacular because it was the first time this truck was used. The fire chief actually had a hose nozzle explode on him because he was not accustomed to the pressure. He just opened the hose up and it about dripped out of his hands because he had full pressure from the motorized pump. Slammed the handle shut, split the valve open, came back, knocked him off the ladder, broke 3 ribs. He missed the firefight. The rest of the guys took the hose and stood there in amazement as the water was 50, 60 feet in the air because it never went that high before. The people in the hotel were evacuated. They were out in the street watching the firefight. And as the hotel was evacuated, someone robbed the safe in the hotel. Somehow
They started the fire.
Somehow, I think I don't want to get sued for this, but somehow 6 automobiles were retrieved from the fire before it got bad. Everything else went up in flames.
They're all dead now. You don't have to worry.
And 3 days later, the newspaper said that Mr. Brown and Mr. Hazley had gone to St. Paul on the train and were driving back with 2 brand new Buick 7-passenger touring cars for their hack business. So, when I told my story to my wife, the only thing she asked was, "What's a kid walking down the alley at 3 o'clock in the morning for?" That was the rest of it was self-explanatory, but that was her question on there. But this was just part of Automobile Row. It was just what happened here back in the teens. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, that's great. I would like John to reflect upon 3rd Street. It's a misnomer, John. Is that true if you call this Historic 3rd?
It's a misnomer. I started calling it Historic 3rd Street about 37 years ago, but thus far the funded study by the City of Rochester has said that there is nothing historic on this block, nothing historic on this block, or nothing historic on the east side of Broadway. That was by a well-funded study done by outside experts, but we forgot about the criteria that we use within a community. So I haven't asked for a motion yet from the city to say, let's remove the name Historic 3rd here because there's nothing historic about it as it relates to the coming from the city council. Okay, and this wonderful funded study of minutia. Now, 3rd Street here was called Saloon Alley. It was all filled with saloons, just like today. The only thing that we're missing thus far in the world of spirits is going all the way to the end, which is east across Broadway. On the east side here, we had rails, we had livery stables, more saloons, okay, and that was a red light district, okay. The rails brought in people. Those people were interested not only spirits and tobacco, but also the red light district, which was a very active spot. Maybe we'll get that in the future, who knows? Now we call them massage parlors. That said, on this area, this building, which was referred to as the D.H. Williams building, was built by a fellow that was a colonel in the Union Army. He came here and retired for the health of his wife. A few years ago, you remember with the wisdom of development and the council, we lost the Williams House. It was called the 5th on 5th Project, a brick building that was built by him, and it survived our 1883 cyclone. But it didn't survive new financing packages today that caused its demise for a building of too much density in a safe neighborhood. So that said, that just happened a few years ago. What I want to say to you all is don't assume that anything is safe because it's historic. Do not make that assumption, whether it's on the National Register or not. All of you are in charge of the community that you want. So just a few years ago, we tore down Williams, who was a 3-time mayor of the city of Rochester, built this building, turned out 500 wagons a year, had 5 blacksmith shops in here, sold the Studebaker ambulance to the Mayo Clinic, the first horse-drawn ambulance, and just a few years ago, even though his son was having a card game on this street, okay? And on this street, his son saw, along with another person, I shouldn't say card game, they were playing checkers. They saw kids playing in the streets. A couple of the kids almost got run over by a wagon. The fellow that the Williams' son, who was named Frank, said to him, somebody should do something about this. He said, I will. I'm going to see that there are playgrounds and there are places for children to play other than in a street. Now, when Frank died, prior to him dying, he donated this piece of property and the lot behind it to the city of Rochester, the funds of all which are to be used for building playground equipment for children. That was done in the 20s. So I'm going to talk about stewardship and integrity here, okay? A little lecture time. Stewardship and integrity. What did we do to embrace the Williams family for being so generous with giving away these assets to the future generations of Rochester? The city council and others did not pay attention to the 5th on 5th project, and we allowed that building to be demolished, okay? That said, just over here, some of you remember the college apartments. That was demolished with no public discussion. So here again, I'm going to say, have public discussion. Write letters to the editor. Engage. Don't assume your elected officials share the same sentiments as you. You might give them information, but maybe you're getting placated and they aren't going to tell your story. Letters to the editors. Write your letters to the editor of the Post Bulletin. So the Williams building here played an instrumental role. It survived the 1883 cyclone. It was built in 1879. Keep in mind, we did not have any electric lights down here to protect people walking downtown until 1897. Prior to that, we had 12 kerosene street lights down here but in 1879 we had 5 carbon arc lights, one of which hung right in here and gave out about 500 watts of power from the generation plant operated by steam right over here where about Dooley's is. Anything more? Time up?
Well, you said, no, here's what I do want you to talk about. The Kennedy building where the tap house is was a saloon, no surprise there, but they made cigars. It was
Right.
a cigar factory. It was a cigar factory, the Kennedy building. It's unfortunate the barnacle that they've attached to the side of that. That's a different discussion. But John, I want you to tell the front of the tap house that used to be Dobby's,
Okay.
the
that's right.
facade there, that looks like that building's been there for a long
Right,
time.
that's important. Thank you.
John saved the facade from a building that will walk by where there's a parking ramp and save that facade, and I want you to tell that story.
So, okay. So, people that liked alcohol and prostitution, being that we had a lot of German-based people around here, they liked tobacco as well. So they made tobacco. They rolled cigars in the Kennedy building. Now it had another floor, but it burned. So it had another floor above what you see. That was burned. Now, the corner building here that Tessa has right now, that was the first bank in town. That was called the Union State Bank. It became remodeled, okay? I have the safe that I hope gets back into their time. It was the first safe in Rochester that was delivered by paddle wheeler to Winona, was brought up here in ox cart, and Sam Allen, who was a good friend of luckily for Kevin and I that we knew him, the person that we're going to talk to you about at Mayo Park, wrote the agreement with Charlie and Will giving the park to the city of Rochester. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but let's talk about the front of the building that we used to call Dowby's, which used to sell tires out of there. Lee knows that. Used to be a tire shop. I'm not going to give you the mic just yet, Lee. So in any case, that building did not look that way. That building, or the front of that building, the terracotta and all the limestone, came from the MC Lawler's building. The MC Lawler's building is on the corner of the parking lot just north of Michael's Restaurant. That was a dry cleaners. That was done by Crawford. Crawford took over after Miller designed this building, and he completed. There was a Miller that was an architect, and then it became Crawford took over and Miller died. But in any case, the MC Lawler's building, those of you that remember it, was the first building restored in town with public money that became demolished for a surface parking lot. Familiar to you? We've got 32 surface parking lots here in town, okay? But in any case, I spent 2 weeks salvaging all that terracotta and the limestone myself, working on top of some scaffolding, and then when, what was her name? The Mankins, Patty Mankin, bless her soul, she wanted to restore those 2 buildings. She bought them, and I said, I'll let you have those pieces. And she was the one then that funded the putting of that front facade on that building today. So don't assume it was always that way. That came from the MC Lawler's building. Anything else?
No, that's
Judge?
wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We need to keep walking. You know, as long as we're here, just to give you a brief synopsis of this building, and I don't know, is Jeff still with us?
No, he didn't
Jeff
come
was
along.
with us earlier, but this was the old City Hall. It was built in 1932, and this is a classic example of an Art Deco building, the interior and the exterior. So Jeff and his family did a wonderful job saving this, restoring it, and then dividing it up into apartments and condominiums. It's an adaptive reuse. But so if you see Jeff, you can thank him for this project. The other thing I think it bears reminding as we make our way down first, and other than the Chateau Theater, which everyone likes to rub up against, we should all like to rub up against these buildings. They're really the important fabric of our community. And as John indicated, you should not assume that any of this is safe. everything here is subject to high pressure to be sold, to be torn down, and to be redeveloped. So if these are things that you hold dear and you like the way this place feels, this place matters. Not only just this building, but this place. This sense of place matters. Then you need to get involved in the public discussion about having a heritage preservation ordinance that is meaningful. We live in a world-class community. We do not have a preservation ordinance. Zero. So we need to have that in place, and that's going to be part of the discussion over the next 6 months, I would hope. But this is, Jeff and his family did a wonderful job with this, and we should all be proud that this still stands here and is an important part of our community and has been for close to 100 years. So,
And is on the tax base. Now,
Yeah.
these adaptive reuses put these facilities back in the tax base. Now, those people that own smaller density buildings on this block or on East Broadway, okay, their properties are being taken by raising their tax base. And unfortunately, nobody in the city of Rochester has any control of raising of those tax base, because thus far we're told that it's based on comps. But let us not get into discussion of comps, which are not the true story of it. It all has to happen at the legislative level to be able to change the criteria so that smaller density facilities have some stabilization and rent. Otherwise, with the help of TIF financing thus far, all of these smaller density places are going to go. So be prepared to express yourself and engage in your community. Thank you.
this city hall was built where this city hall was. So this was torn down, built in 1884, beautiful structure. And this building was torn down, but this was constructed in its place. The other thing I would
This is
ask,
the owner of City Hall right
this is
now.
Mr. Allman. He deserves a nice round of applause. There's a sharp contrast on this block, and we're not going to walk down this right now. But I would say to you, do you want a building like this, or do you want that hotel? You want it to look like that? What do you want your community to look like? Because we're headed to look like that EFUS, that hotel that's on the corner. So, Jeff, did you want to open it?
Sure.
Jeff has graciously, how many people have ever been in the old City Hall just in the foyer? Well, let's go in. This is why this walk just evolves. Jeff has been kind enough, he's going to open the door. We'll just walk through the foyer area and then head back down First Street. Okay? All right, great. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, sure.
White shots, Bruce. White shots.
White shot? Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Yes, I'm just saying hi and.
There will be cookies, young man.
I was
There'll
in
be
your
cookies at the end of the
office
walk.
yesterday.
I was there yesterday.
You know,
Oh, no, you were with Kathy.
Yeah.
This one's 1933. William McGinley Miller died during the construction, and Harold Crawford threw away a number of his plans and started over. So the art of this preservation, as I see it, is to keep the character defining elements that make it feel like what it was, but also adapt it to new uses. Safety codes, fire sprinklers, all those things that make buildings habitable are some kind of a trade-off with preservation. So in this building, we have about a third of the square footage is still hallways and terrazzo and grand stairway, which is way more than you'd design for in a modern building. If you can circulate in and out of this little corridor here, there's some pictures of the before and after. This is 22 market rate apartments. We got some city assistance with tax increment financing, which means they forgive some of your property taxes. In this one, they gave me a check up front, which helped me buy and pay for the construction. Lucky me. The building had gone empty as a for rent office by the month. Property was 15% occupied after 3 years. So it was a big hemorrhage for the city, and they were happy to find a good home for it. We redeveloped it 20 years ago. I'm the sole owner. 22 market rate apartments. We've been about 98% occupied for 20 years. And have one open now.
Those looking, yeah.
I seem to remember one of the apartments still has the safe in it.
Yeah, there were 3 jails and 5 bank vaults in the original building, and we kept 2 of the vaults. So you walk out of the kitchen into the dining room through the vault door, and there's some photographs on the other side of this wall right here by the elevator.
And no jail cell.
No, the jail cells were gone before I got it.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting, though. We were talking about whether to put computer programmers or HR in the jail cells.
That's a toss-up, isn't it? No, well, Jeff, thank you for opening the doors and being so generous. This is just, I mean, if you look at the floors, the lighting fixtures, the marble, the way this stairwell is framed, it's just absolutely spectacular. And these are the kinds of things that we should hold dear and that we should
You want to see the
strive to
apartment?
maintain those.
I got
So
an empty one.
it's-
I'm not trying to. But I mean, it's rented, but it's empty.
Yeah. So
Jeff, this is all Harold Crawford.
Well, actually, it's Miller, and Crawford changed it, and mostly he changed the light fixtures. So we have a collection of colored pencil drawings of light fixtures, including bare bulb sockets that somebody had carefully drawn, and John Kriesel had saved had come across the original India ink and pencil drawings, which I have on long-term loan.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for your graciousness. Let's give Jeff a round of applause.
The black walnut benches from the city council chamber that we use for meetings like this. We had more than we could use, so some are at the History Center and some are in courtroom number 6.
You're right. They are.
Yeah.
They are. I forgot about that.
Get them back.
Yeah, you did. You did. As long as we're here, because it's kind of quiet, we're going to make our way down to the Peace Plaza where the chateau is. But as we're walking down this street, there's a couple of buildings that you should take note of. What is the new Mexican restaurant? City Market used to be there. What is? Okay. That used to be a place called Holland's Market. And there was a guy named Ernest Holland who started a grocery store in 1907. And then in 1930, his son Newton Holland, who really was the driving force behind the Art Center, and quite a dapper guy. I remember him when I was a kid, and he always had a bow tie on. He was just always meticulously dressed. But he moved a business in there, and then they built the second story, and there were 2 cafeterias. They mirrored each other, and you could go in there, and that was where the leaders in the community would have coffee and baked goods in the morning and would have lunch. You would always find the mayor and all kinds of other important, self-important or otherwise, that were hanging around in there. And then it has, it's actually been part of the core of this First Avenue with all the different restaurants that have been established there. Then before you get to that, you need to look at what's called the Stebbins Building or Stevens Building that was formerly occupied by China Hall. And those of you who are not familiar with that building, just take it all in. There are China plates that are affixed into the red brick facade. And it's quite remarkable. I don't know that I've ever seen a building like that with that many pieces of china in the facade. And where did John go? Oh, okay. I knew that there was a reason why he wasn't in here. He actually has the old China Hall sign, which is this huge neon teapot that he would like to eventually get back downtown with some of the other neon signs. And then where Olive Juice is, and in that location, that was the original, what was called the Commercial Club. And that was the precursor for the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. So that building was built for that purpose. And just kind of take a look at those buildings as we make our way down. And then the building on the corner, because we're going to skedaddle our way to the chateau. It's called the Ramsey Building. And if you look at it, it's where HGA is up on the second floor. The medallion on 2nd Street says 1911. It was built in 1878, and then they decided to upgrade it in 1911. So the building was kind of completely redone, even though the interior is the same, and that's why the medallion says 1911. It's a much older building. And upstairs there is where the Mayos started their medical practice, right in that corner. I think there's a plaque that's still on the corner that designates that. So kind of stroll your way past that, and then we're going to stop kind of in front of the Oddfellows building and have a little discussion about that endangered species. Okay? So, again, Jeff, thank you very much. All right.
China Hall here, this is the second location. The first location, first location is right next to where the Marquette Bank building used to be. And what do we call that bank building? Oh, I've forgotten. Used to be Marquette. Is it associated on the corner? I mean, when they change names, it's hard to keep track. But in any case, right on Broadway, before the Marquette Bank building was built, that was Weber and Hargesheimer drugstore. Right next door was a place called the Monogram Saloon and Livery Stable, which happened to be my great-grandfather's. Right next door was the first China Hall. Some of you that look at some of the historic photos, you'll see an eagle up on top, a bronze eagle, which was incredible, and the Winkles family. All those buildings over there are about 1870s, 1880s. The Winkles family bought that China Hall, moved over here, and they started this facility. So everybody that came for your matching service and so forth, for your traditional dining, came out of China Hall. That was the Winkles family. Now, where's the chair for the
Stand
a lot
up
of
there.
people?
Stand up there.
We'll be on the video.
Okay. Well, for those of you that recall and grew up here, on the corner where U.S. Bank was the Rochester Masonic Temple. It was a granite, a gray granite, magnificent building. The interior was elegant, and it just, I mean, it got blown down along with the Zumbro Hotel for what's considered progress. So that's something that's been lost that you'll never be able to recreate it. You couldn't afford to do it. You couldn't find the workmen and the work people to do it. The other thing I wanted to point out was the old Olmsted County Bank and Trust Company, and you'll be able to see it when you get around the corner. But that's just a great piece of architecture. And I think it's one of those buildings that we take for granted and we just walk by it and we don't appreciate its architectural significance. And that was an Ellerby design. And they did a lot of designing of a lot of buildings here in town. Obviously the Plummer Building, our friend Jeff Dane is up there. He promised us music, but he let us down, right?
He's going to give it to us at about noon.
About noon, you'll hear the carillons, and he's a friend of ours that plays the carillons. This building here, the Oddfellows, let me get my notes on this, because this is a building that has been redone much like Hollins and the other building we talked about. This was first built in 1861. So the city was just a few years old when that building was constructed. And then this was the home to the post office. This was where the original post office was at that location. And then it was transformed in 1934 it was changed into this, and all the terracotta and all the other accents to that were added in 1934. There was a cigar store on the corner, and then there was a place called, was it the Seville? The Seville Cafe was one entrance, and the Green Parrot was another. And then the Green Parrot had both entrances, and it was the only restaurant where you could go in two separate doors, right? There were two entrances to the Green Parrot.
They had a parrot in there. That's why it was called the Green Parrot.
Yeah, and in Alan's book and others, there's all these wonderful photographs of the Green Parrot signs, and many of us would like to recover and restore those signs and put them up somewhere, right, John?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And what did Oddfellows stand for? Does anyone know what the three key words were to the Oddfellows? Oh, it's kind of like this trip: friendship, love, truth. Right? So we're all Oddfellows today. So we're going to make our way down to the chateau real quickly, and then over to the amphitheater. Yes.
So Hargesheimer was the druggist around here. He had a place down here as well. And my grandfather was a physician that was brought here by W.W. Mayo to be the doctor for the townspeople. And he was not associated with Mayo, and it was purposely set up that way, sort of like it is now in some ways.
Speak in that direction.
Okay.
We can
And
hear you here.
he, during the Prohibition, my grandfather used to prescribe alcohol to some people. They had to have alcohol as part of their treatment. And Mr. Hargesheimer was the one who would fill the prescriptions from behind his desk. Well, they got busted. And they did nothing to my grandfather, but they sent Mr. Hargesheimer to jail. Now, his wife was just mortified, and it was awful. It was really a terrible experience for the family. He was sent to jail over in Winona, and he went to Winona and was good friends with the sheriff over there. So he spent his time, 6 months or whatever it was that he was in jail, going out and fishing and hunting with the sheriff, and everything turned out to be okay.
And probably dispensing alcohol.
Oh, likely.
Drinking with the sheriff.
Yes, that made it okay.
Okay, there's a couple of things. This building here is the what's called the 101st Avenue building, and this was what year was this built? 1940. And I mean, if you pulled off this facade here, this is again a really magnificent, very simple building, and this is where upstairs KROC TV and radio first started, and this is where the Gentlings moved their location until they moved it down onto the corner of 6th and 1st. And the original one of the post office was here too, so this was kind of the epicenter town. Yes, Jane?
I just want to add that prior to putting on this metal facade, this was a stunning, streamlined, modern style of building. It's designed by the Ellerby firm.
Yeah.
Did a lot of all of the Mayo Clinic buildings.
Yeah.
Want to repeat that?
Well, Jane, come here and repeat that again. Mike is, I can't remember that. I didn't realize there was a test.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, prior to the construction of this metal facade, half facade here, it was a stunning, streamlined, modern style of building, which is something we don't have any more of in Rochester, to my knowledge. And it was designed by the Ellerby architectural firm that did all the Mayo Clinic buildings prior to the most recent ones.
So what Jane's pointing out, this little facade they put on here has kind of destroyed the integrity of the building architecturally, visually. It's easily removable. What's not easily removable, if you remember the old Woolworths building, was that fire glazed brick, and we just slapped EFIS over that. That should never have been allowed to happen. That building might as well be down. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. We're going to just briefly touch on the chateau. I do want to let you know that there is an event this Thursday, the 26th of May, starting at 4. It's a community of 4:30. It's a community event. There'll be Green River Pop. Will it be open?
It will be open
You-
to one and all.
One and all, you'll be able to go in. There'll be maybe a brief presentation about kind of what is percolating through in terms of the potential use of this. Thank God the city of Rochester realized, even though it was 20-some years later, that this was an important part of the community. Architecturally, historically, economically, you just can't understate the importance of this building. I want to tell you something about, and I was thinking about this last night. You see the Wells Fargo Bank? It's really kind of an interesting, it's a very modern steel and glass building. And it arches over the street. The only reason, I want to repeat, the only reason that the Chateau is standing today is because of my dear friend John Kriesel. In the late 70s, he undertook an effort by the Worldwide Friends of the Chateau Theater. I'm not sure how worldwide it was, but we thought it was, and fought the city, the developers, everyone, the business community. They wanted this, the Mayo Clinic, they wanted that torn down and to put a hotel there. And it's just remarkable that, and it was on the verge of being torn down before Mr. Schifolius and Barnes & Noble came in and gave it a life, and now we would hope that it would go back to kind of its original purpose and be a venue for everyone to enjoy in the community. And so that's, but I know they're going to have some public input sessions, and to the extent you have some ideas about what it could be used for, but it is, it's been saved, which is remarkable. Yes, John?
I'm going to make a brief comment. You were talking about, stay there.
Oh.
People like seeing you up there,
Oh,
Kevin.
yeah. Well, it's a little dangerous up here.
This facility, Wells Fargo, that went across the street, when we came to an impasse of talking to the city of Rochester, Piper, who was the developer, and everyone else saying that the Chateau has to go. We don't have enough room to build our building. It was our group that said to them, how about getting free land, free space to make your project work? It was our idea to go across the street, which made this, here's the important point, which made this building more valuable, the Kaler more valuable, because of the Skyway connections. Now, a little bit earlier we were talking about, does it make sense that the city of Rochester bought this building? My opinion, at least, is it's going to continue to enhance and make all the other surrounding areas more valuable, because it will be a jewel again. It will be a destination again that will allow all economic levels of life to have access to it. It will not be an exclusive facility that will be for the inner circle. It's going to be for all masses, and it will enhance the other space here, and therefore make it more valuable from the tax base that's going to be paid by the private sector, as it did with this.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. All right. We're going to make our way underneath the overpass, and then we're going to head down East Center Street. Yes.
I've been watching the reaction of the young people here, like this guy. They're paying attention. Come closer, Chuck. I would just like to hear a little bit of reaction from somebody that's under like 15 or 25 or something. What are you sensing out of it?
Do you like the idea of kind of maintaining the fabric?
I do.
Okay.
Face this way. Well, the story he just told about how they came up with the idea of this and how it improved the value, to me was just crazy. That to me is amazing. Isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah.
And how they fought for it, for me, I think is, I don't know, I find that to be just outstanding.
Well, thank you. We've been fighting for that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for being here.
Yes.
Your name is?
Corey.
Corey, Kevin. Nice to meet you, man.
You as well.
All right.
Absolutely.
With my friend Corey here, we're going to make our way down first. And there's a hotel that's on the corner. I'm not going to stop and talk about it because there's too much traffic there. But it's the old Carlton Hotel. And it was built originally in 1920 by a Mr. Grassley, whose son then became either a 2 or 3 time mayor of Rochester. And then floors were added on in 1930, 10 years later. Take a close look at that building. Some of the detail work that's up around the top of the building, the marble work on the first floor. It's a beautiful building. And one would hope that that would not get torn down, but you know, we always want to be like Ann Arbor or Portland or Minneapolis or St. Paul. Why not turn that into some type of boutique hotel, cool space, affordable, and yet restore that? And there's probably tax incentives, all kinds of things that could be done to accomplish that. Oh, we're talking about well, when did you get here? Oh, okay, yeah. No, we're talking about the Carlton Hotel and how there should be a discussion about that and its architectural integrity. Yes, Michael.
Remember what you said about demolition?
Oh, demolition is forever. Don't ever forget that. Demolition is forever. So we're going to go here and then down to East Center Street, and let's meet at the amphitheater. All right? All right.
Marion Keith. She was involved in Mariana Wilson.
Well, it was 5 years. 5 years.
Yeah. And it's well, at one point
To just transform its place into what it is today, with a magnificent street light up here, the magnificent attention to this wonderful space here, so well kept. Ask yourself how this could have happened from what, 1952?
Yeah.
From 1952 until now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, in a larger sense, kind of the way this has been kept and the way it's been allowed to deteriorate is kind of symptomatic. Oh, it's kind of symptomatic. What we're sitting in right now is kind of symptomatic of heritage preservation in our community. This has not been maintained to the degree it should be maintained. The Mayo boys were moved out of here. The Mayo boys were moved out of here in 1986, I believe. They were placed in front of the Taylor Arena, the new Civic Center addition. They've now been moved. They're being restored. We don't know who's paying for that, whether there's some kind of quid pro quo. We cleaned up the statues. Now they're ours. I would just say as the first salvo, we would want the Mayo brothers to come back home, because this amphitheater, this was designed to hold those statues. It was one entire architectural landscape art design, and we would hope that they would come back here. The sad thing is that this was part of a larger effort that the community undertook to create this magnificent plaza with elm trees draping over it, and basically a promenade that would lead you to the end.
Where's the photo of the park?
Yeah.
I need the photo of the park. Somebody could bring it to us, please.
Yeah. And
no, not that one. There's a larger one.
Not sure where that is.
One of the park.
At any rate, the Mayo brothers were situated here, and then their father was at the end of the park.
The Calliope wagon.
Yeah.
You're breaking his conversation.
Well, that's all right. It's like a typical day for me. But this was absolutely a magnificent park, and I just want to read a couple of things for you. Rochester and Olmsted County citizens, this is something that was written in the 40s. When the Mayo brothers died in 1939, within about 60 days of one another, there was a huge amount of grief in the community, and they wanted to honor these two important figures in the world of medicine, in the world, quite honestly. And so the war got in the way, World War II. So the efforts that were undertaken in the early 40s kind of got stalled out. And then it was picked up again in the early 50s. But this was designed, the Rochester and Olmsted County citizens will pay everlasting tribute to the great Mayo brothers, Dr. Will and Dr. Charlie, with a simple, stately shrine in Mayo Memorial Park. The decision to build such a memorial to stand as an outward manifestation of their love and esteem for the celebrated surgeons was reached on November 10th of 1941 at a meeting of approximately 100 people from Olmsted County and Rochester who got together to decide what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? This was not publicly funded in the sense that we think things are publicly funded. This was dollars that were raised from school children to business people. There were going to be shaded walks along the mall, and there were until this wall got created, to accommodate foot travelers. This is what they said. We are trying to create a place where those from near and far may come to reflect upon the accomplishments, high aims, and purposes of the Doctors Mayo. So that's what drove kind of how this was designed. The curious thing about this, the brothers, how many have seen what those statues look like? Okay? Well, they were going to be dressed in what they called their working clothes, which was surgeons' gowns, and carrying out the medical theme. This is why this amphitheater is so important. Carrying out this medical theme is the amphitheater, which is symbolic of the operating rooms where the Mayos worked. As medical men from the world oversat and watched the brothers, so will it be possible for people of the world to sit within this shrine and ponder the benefits which accrued to mankind from the Mayos' lives. The figures will face west, their father will face east. And this was dedicated on September 27th of 1952. The statues were executed by a world-famous sculptor. His name was James Earl Fraser. He was born in Winona. And these were two of his last works that he ever did. And Judge Gates, who was one of the people that dedicated this, it was Governor Anderson, Judge Gates, Congressman Walter Judd, who grew up in this community. Here's what Judge Gates had to say. "We hope that people who come here will receive as much inspiration as do visitors to the Lincoln and other well-known memorials." That's what he said when this place was dedicated. John and I firmly believe that when you look at these words, I mean, they're more than words. It's a belief system. It's what drove this community. It's the driving influence behind the Mayo Clinic. What does that say, John?
They revered the truth and sought to knowledge. Their rare vision still challenges tomorrow. Here they lived and worked for humanity, surgeons, scientists, lovers, their fellow man. Now, I want to read something else here. This is the Mr. Fraser. This is what he had to say. "This was a real and difficult task, happily by using attributes of the medical profession in a symbolic way in architecture and in costumes. I believe we have found a conception which is original and beautiful. In short, a shrine where one may sit quietly and contemplate the worth to humanities of these great brothers." So this was supposed to be a place to enrich one's soul, have solace. The brothers were up here, and they faced their father, W.W. Mayo. This was a perfect alignment to the Plummer building. Kevin's going to comment about a flagpole that was here. So what we did in just these short years was expand the Mayo Civic Auditorium, ruin this for the greater good of removing the solace to people that come here to seek their medical ailments and embrace their thoughts of serenity that they might have. on this particular initial team was somebody that Kevin and I mentioned a little bit earlier, Sam Allen. Sam Allen, his father was an attorney as well.
Yeah.
Sam Allen was an attorney here in town that had his office on the second floor of the Union State Bank building, which now is Tessa's operation. What does she call it today?
Grand Rounds.
Grand Rounds. Okay. Sam Allen, when this addition was to be put on, because he wrote the wishes of Dr. Charlie and Dr. Will. He was the one that put that all together. He came to a city council meeting, asked for the other attorneys in the city of Rochester, because at that time he was about 90 years old. He asked for the other legal team and the members of the city council and the mayor to help defend the wishes of Dr. Charlie and Will, and otherwise said it should go back to the family because we are breaking their wishes. I was the one that wrote it. I can interpret it. Nobody in the city of Rochester would come and support him. Now, quote unquote. So he was addressing his dissertation to Kurt Taylor, who was in charge of Park and Rec, and Frank Wilkes, who was the first person to be the manager of the medical group. Sam was told that the reason that we are transforming this space and turning it into a different venue is this park is just a place where undesirables hang out. Therefore, with our vision, we are going to move forward and build more EFS and ruin this space. He got no support. That's what I wanted to stress here. We went against the wishes of Charlie and Will for now what we have here, this disheveled mess. What year was that? When the major addition was put on the Chatsworth Theater, on the Mayo Civic Auditorium, that was back, I'm going to guess probably 1975?
No.
70?
Yeah, Taylor Arena or the first one?
Taylor Arena.
Taylor Arena.
Taylor was in the late 80s.
Well, then it was probably prior to that because he would have died by then. But so it was when we took this space away, moved the brothers that weren't owned by anybody other than the public, and I think Kevin pointed that out, and we want the brothers back as well as.
Well, there's some other things. I mean, there should be a little promenade here, some old street lights. We should clean up this entire area. It's just not, I wish Patrick Sieb was here because, they talk about placemaking and things like that. This exists. This doesn't, it won't take that much money or sweat equity, whatever it may take, to transform this back into what was given to us by a previous generation. We're just all kind of passing through, to be honest with you. We should make this. This is owned by the city.
It's owned by city.
And it is under, you need to understand, it's still under tremendous pressure because of this, let me choose my words carefully, stupid idea to build a hockey rink back in here.
Keep in mind, if this doesn't cash flow, this facility now, and it's all a matter of how you want to just define cash flow, do we mention council people's names? No. Yeah, no, we can. No, okay. It will be transformed into a world-class skating arena, which will remove more space of this green space unless all of us become involved. Keep in mind these pines here, these Norway pines, were put here originally. We have 2 of them here, well cared for today, as you can see, with the surrounding space here. Now, I'll try to be quiet, but I want to read something to you before I stand down. Okay. History is not a burden on the memory, but an illumination of the soul.
That's our belief system right there. Thank you, John. But before we wind up, there's this magnificent flagpole. I don't know if you've ever either walked by it or stood next to it. You can't see it from here, but it's just on the other side of the Art Center. Go stand by that. It's on this marble base. And Diane, do you remember what it's made of? Is it made out of steel? It's absolutely, and I don't know how many stories tall it is. 8 stories tall. It's just magnificent. But the thing about that, there's a historic story behind that flagpole is that it was dedicated on June 9th, 1929. It was presented to the city by J.H. Kaler, Mr. Kaler, the Kaler Hotel. And then it was moved in 1952 to become part of the Mayo Memorial Park. So it has historic integrity as well. But not only this amphitheater, but what's remaining of the green space here is really important. Down by the riverside, you can think of all the, I mean, that's kind of part of our heritage now, those kinds of things that bring people together. So we appreciate your patience today on what the 1 hour cruise that turned into a 2 hour cruise. We lost some people along the way. That means there's more cookies and lemonade for the survivors of this tour. Yes. This was the band shell. It was right here and it was demolished for this. The old band shell was demolished for this purpose. Yeah. Bunny seems to believe that. I don't. But
I want to mention that Roy Watson was on the original team of transforming this space, as well as my wife's grandfather.
yeah, yeah.
Henry Postier was part of the board of directors and committees of the Mayo Memorial Association. We, as well as Paul Grassley, that Judge Lund mentioned earlier, Knowlton, Fiegel, McQuillan Field. These are people dedicated to this space, and we have lost their trust.
And
Disengaged.
The interesting thing about that, I don't think you can find a physician or a Mayo Clinic employee that's on that list. The community at that time was much more diverse, in terms of the business community than it's become. So the other thing that you've gotten for surviving, we have replicated these postcards from the early 50s that doctors, Mayo Memorial and Mayo Park, Rochester, Minnesota, and it's actually the design that was the original design and what we'd like to see in the future. So everybody gets one or more of those, and you can hang them up on your refrigerator, tack them up. You can send some in. You could, yeah, you're right, Judy. You could. They're postcards. You can send them to your council people if you're passionate enough about kind of what we've talked about today. Yeah.
We will try and download this. We don't have a site just yet, but we'll try and download the original memorial pamphlet if people have interest in seeing this. You come here and face them. Right. Chuck Sibley with KTTC, the cameraman that knows what to shoot and when.
When the Soldiers Field Veterans Memorial was built, it was built under the idea of no public dollars. It was Wayne Stillman's idea and a lot of other people. That was built with no public dollars, all private funding. And one of the main things I saw through my eyes as a photographer is that the county was good enough to bring people like the Olmsted County Sentence to Serve. You talked about people that come in here. Olmsted County Sentence to Serve is prisoners who can work off a day of their sentence by, they put in a lot of those pavers down at the Soldiers Field Memorial. You get something like that going, and I don't know how anybody could argue with it. You give somebody a shovel and a rake and stuff like that, you might have something pretty special here, and you take a negative and turn it into a positive. That's all I got to say. All right.
All right, we done? Pass it
Oh.
over.
Explain where that came from. I just want to,
So if you want to see the original oil portraits of Charlie and Will in their surgeon's garb, they are inside the, is that called the Taylor Arena now?
No,
the
it's
first
presentation
hall. Kevin wants to talk to you about that original presentation hall. We've been told that it's acoustically imperfect, but I want you to comment on that, because remember you were saying something, was it yesterday or this morning, regarding the significance of that auditorium in its day and how it was hailed as being such a magnificent space.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? That was a confirmation. So these portraits, we were given permission by the mayor to photograph those that are in the lobby if you want to see them. So they were photographed with the help of Mike and reprinted and made to look like oil paintings. And what's kind of interesting about them, they're in frames that at one time were either in Central High School or the Kaufman Building. The frames once held George and Abe Lincoln, those were thrown away, but they saved the front. Luckily, I got those. And we put those portraits in here. Those were loaned to RCTC because Charlie Mayo was instrumental in the formulation of RCTC. So we had them here today, bringing the brothers back until we get them back with the bronze statues. Are there any questions? Now's the time. Yes.
What year was the statue moved from this location to its current location?
When was the statue moved from here to its current location? Anybody know?
It's probably 84,
80s.
86.
Mid-80s? Okay.
80s, yeah.
Yeah, they
Yes.
took the father out at the end. We still don't know how W.W. Mayo, that was paid for by the school children of Rochester and was at the end of this park, we do not still to this day know how that ended up in the park next to Gonda.
You want to comment on
Well,
that
I just
funding?
think that, I don't know. I mean, how is it that he was restored and then moved to a private location? So it's really hard
You
to
can
kind of-
ask those questions.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where you would start, but
Does it still
ideally, we'd
belong
like
to the people?
Does
Ideally,
it still
well,
belong to the people? What do you think?
We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. There's no minutes that says the park board sold it or the city sold it to the Mayo Clinic. A family that created that park down there with Mother Mose and then the boys, you know, sitting on the step, which is an iconic piece of artwork in the community. You know, we don't know how that all went down. And, you know, ideally he should be right at the end of a little promenade here, looking at his sons. I mean, to be honest with you. But, you know, those are hard questions, and if you ask that, if you get an answer, let us know.
Question in the back.
Does Mayo have anything to say about this at all? About taking care of it?
I would say they're not as inclusive as we'd like to see them. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, because this park was donated by the Mayos in 1904.
We're still looking for records of how they got moved without permission of the city council or going through Park and Rec, because this was put here by the public and not by Mayo.
Right.
But it still reflects them.
It reflects what?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. This would, we're guessing to recreate this today is probably $2.5 million.
Does that include tearing down this thing?
I would just as soon have, Michael Wojak, I'd like to have you bring that up for a motion.
And if they really say that they need a hockey facility here because this building's not feasible, maybe we just get rid of the building that's not feasible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get rid of this new Dallas airport design. Dulles, yeah, this architectural marvel, and maybe move it down to Silver Lake and accentuate Silver Lake.
Yeah. There's a
Yes,
question.
question?
Oh.
I was wondering about the statues that were here, and you mentioned that they've gone
We have been told,
for restoration.
we have been told that they are currently being restored and the brothers are going to be brought back here, we hope, but we don't know when. We want to make sure that there's going to be a rededication and that the public is in charge of the rededication and not, quite frankly, not Mayo or DMC. It's the public. Yes?
Is there a group or an idea to formalize a group of people interested and concerned about revitalizing this area, caring for it the way it needs to be cared for, anything like that, where this is the group of people
Yes.
that are speaking on behalf
Yes,
of this land space?
most of the group is here, some are missing. That would be part of the Rochester Conservancy.
Okay.
So if you'd like to engage in that, did you register your name?
I did.
Okay,
So now you've got my email.
okay.
Everybody's free to
Email
do
and,
it.
and we'll wait until you leave before we sell the email list. Any other questions?
Eric, did you have one?
Yeah, who's responsible for reading and raking this area?
The city of
The city.
Rochester.
City of Rochester and Park and Rec, and boy, was it easy to rent this space.
It
Very
wasn't.
cynical here.
It wasn't.
Impossible. And by the way, if you want to come here and rent this space, you have to use one of 3 people that are approved to sell food and dispense food here at the Mayo Civic Auditorium. So if you want to have a gathering here and bring your own hot dish, can't do that. That's what this park has turned into now.
It's not part of the Rochester Park system.
It's part of the Rochester Park system,
But they
but
charge
there's
you.
a contract with the Mayo Civic Auditorium that the people that provide food there are supposed to provide food here, so don't bring any hot dish. You're gonna have to hire it from one of the approved caterers. Say, by the way, I just wanna say, Joe Powers, because of that
Yes.
problem, Joe Powers is the one that donated all of the lemonade,
All the cookies.
all the cookies, and all the cups. So you say thanks to him because he let us bypass all of that and donated it. Now, don't forget to pick up after yourself, take cookies home. Yes, questions? Now's the time for questions.
She was asking who are the three people that you mentioned just a few minutes ago?
The three caterers.
I hope I don't have that data in my brain. One is Joe Powers.
Yeah.
Concord. Use them.
There's also a fee
Yep.
to
Well,
rent this.
even though this is part of the whole proclamation for the month, we went through, let's say, a great deal of stress and anxiety trying to waive the $1,000 fee to be able to get you all here today.
It was waived.
Yes.
It was waived.
Well, we hope so.
Was it waived or did we, is this just civil disobedience?
Next question. No, you can, but you couldn't have a
Don't
gathering.
get caught.
Yeah, you couldn't have a gathering of people. I mean, you couldn't have like a wedding. You couldn't have a wedding here and then.
I mean, you come here and eat a sandwich, but if you want a gathering here and you want to rent a space here, you have to bring your food here from one of the 3 approved caterers.
And it's not a food truck.
Not a food truck.
Is that what a civil disobedience?
Yes.
Family picnic.
What happens on concert night?
Beg your pardon?
What happens on concert night?
That is one of the approved people that provide food here. I mean, for the vendors. I mean, people bring
But
their...
that's a city event, so the city's not going to charge itself. I don't think.
Yeah.
No. But
Well, we can't thank you all enough. Here again, we're going to say, please stay engaged. This is your community.
all right. God
Thank you
bless.
very much.
All right. Thank you.
But, yeah, that's an old rendering.
There's more cookies and lemonade.